having an enormous stroke, and this is the first time he has preached since having this stroke. So I know you're all going to be praying for him. And so let's just pray for you now, David. Lord, I do just pray for David, and I thank you for him and Sam, and I thank you for the pure gold that I see in their lives that is the product of suffering. But I thank you for that pure gold, Lord. And I just remember that you said to Moses, you speak and I will be your mouth. Yeah. And I just pray you will be David's mouth this morning. And Lord, give us listening hearts to hear what he has to say for us. And just bless this couple, Lord. Bless them with complete healing, with joy and peace and hope through your Holy Spirit. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to start with a reading and then I'll leave David to explain it. So it's from Mark chapter 5 and it's verses 1 to 20. If you want to have a look in the Bibles. The healing of a demon-possessed man. They went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an evil spirit came from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him any more, not even with a chain. For he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and in the hills he would cry out and cut himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. He shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? Swear to God that you won't torture me." For Jesus has said to him, "Come out of this man, you evil spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." And he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. A large herd of pigs were feeding on the nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus, "Send us among the pigs, allow us to go into them." He gave them permission, and the evil spirits came out and went into the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. Those tending the pigs ran off and reported this in the town and countryside, and the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there, dressed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people what had happened to the demon-possessed man and told about the pigs as well. Then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Jesus did not let him, but said, "Go home to your family and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." So the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and all of the people were amazed.
Just as Martin puts up the slides, I need to give you a little stewardess safety announcement. There's a high probability that I may cry in this sermon. But just one thing you need to understand is my strokes. My brain has helpfully lost the ability to control my emotions. So when you might laugh or cry a little bit, I will have a fit of laughter and cry for 20 seconds, which is rather excessive. So if I do cry excessively and I do this, just relax, remain calm. I'm thinking mental thoughts that I've learnt in rehab to help me regain my composure. Basically, if Sam's nervous, you get nervous. If she's relaxed, you stay relaxed. That's fine. So we need to get these to work. That's not going to help, is it? Martin's going to do some wonders. There we go. A big question in society today. I need you to get your brains in gear, and I need one or two people to shout out what they think is the main question facing UK society today. So let's have a hands up in the class. A few people having a go. What do you think are the main issues? Here we go. Sorry. Fuel, yeah. Anybody else? Climate change, yeah. Sorry. Poverty, yes. I was definitely. Oh, this is not working.
What about COVID?
Yes, we had climate change. Definitely, that's affecting the entire world. Also, the cost of living, that's affecting so many different areas. But I'm surprised that you didn't get the biggest, most important one that's in the front of all our minds right now. You don't realise it, but it's there. No, it's this. Is how many followers do the most recent winners of Love Island have on their social media? That obviously is a fundamental question that faces us all every day. Now, just by way of confession, who watches Love Island? Right, Ryan, they all need to pass over it, they're lying. So, but seriously, there was a big question in the time that Jesus had his 3 years of ministry on earth. And the question was very simply, the man, Jesus of Nazareth, is he the Son of God? And what confused the people at the time was they were expecting some kind of military figure in the line of King David. And there had been some people in the past people had thought they were messianic figures. They pinned their hopes on, and they ended up not fulfilling that role. So there was already this kind of bubbling sentiment in the community there about whether Jesus could fulfill this kind of figure. But the crowd were in two minds about it. They often heard him start his teaching with the phrase, my Father, my Father. And they were thinking, what does that mean? They're trying to work it out. And some people were quite quick and thought, well, he's not talking about himself. So straight away they were thinking, is he talking about God? Does he have some kind of special relationship with God? Is he more than just a man? Does that elevate him above human status in somehow? Some were saying, well, on the contrary, we actually know where he's from. We know that he was born in Bethlehem. We know that he was brought up in Nazareth, and we know his father is Joseph. So they wrote him off. And there were some people, the Pharisees particularly, who said, well, he can't be God because by the power of Satan, he casts out demons. So that makes him the prince of demons. Now the disciples were faced with the same question themselves as well. And in the previous chapter, what Sam read out for us, they have an experience of Jesus calming the wind and the waves. And at the end of that passage, they look at each other in aghast amazement and say, who is this man? He even calms the wind and the waves. Now, they couldn't quite at that point say he's a Messiah, he's God, but they were seriously questioning, who can do this? A man can't do this kind of stuff that we're seeing lived out in front of us. Now, there were a number of things that made people think like that, and they marked Jesus out in particular ways. Number one, he was marked out obviously by his miracles. And even some of the Pharisees came to him, and if you read the Gospel of John, under the cover of night and said, God must be with you. No one can do these kind of miracles if God is not with him. Not you must be God. They weren't going that far yet. But they were thinking, God must be with you at least. He's not with us like he's with you. So already Jesus was kind of being raised up a little more. The crowd also often, when they heard his teaching, they would remark, he teaches with such authority. And they set him apart from the Pharisees and the Sadducees who they looked up to there. They didn't quite know where to pigeonhole him, but he definitely wasn't a man by what he was saying or doing and sounded like, but they weren't too sure whether he was God. But we are certain from verse 7 in this passage we read today that Jesus didn't want demonic pronouncements about who he was. The demons knew exactly that he was Jesus Christ, the Son of God, but he didn't want that to mark him out. He didn't want a proclamation from the enemy to mark out who he was. He was going to do something else in this story. And at the end of the story, we see his command to this man who he miraculously delivered from the many, many demons. And he said, I want you to go and tell the people how much mercy I've had on you, how much I have done for you. And if we just break down this man in the story who was possessed by demons, we can see how much Jesus actually did for him. And there's so many, I've had to just write some notes down so I don't forget any, so bear with me as I read them out to you. At the end of the passage, we see that Jesus was standing there telling this man to go and share this news. And the man was sitting at Jesus' feet, clothed. Now, prior to this man had the reputation of just walking around naked. And he was so possessed by these demons that he didn't even bother to put his clothes on. Didn't have the wherewithal in his mind to get dressed. Didn't even focus or bother with that kind of thing. He was naked. So this is a dramatic change. Already, just in that statement, we can see how much God has done for him. He was sitting and not roaming around. He had the reputation for just wandering. And one day you'd be out for a walk one day on the shores of Galilee, and you'd suddenly be accosted by this crazy man who was shouting naked and just roaming around aimlessly. You kind of wonder what he was doing. And he was definitely not in his right mind. He was crying out aloud, randomly, spontaneously, self-harming. He was mightily distressed, really under the weather, very under pressure, controlled by forces which people didn't quite know how to verbalize, but they could see the effects that they were having on his life. And he was sitting there with this incredible testimony of how much God had done, and the people were gathering around him now. Before he was isolated, roaming the hills naked, as we said, but afterwards people were around him and he was going to be sent to people. And he was no longer aimless. He had that commission from God to be sent. He had a purpose and a drive, a reason for being alive. In his marvelous deliverance from God, he'd been centered, put at peace, and given a purpose to go off and tell how much God had done for him. And this is similar to my story. I'm just at this point going to ask Sam to look away. I was 46, 10 years ordained from Oxford University, pastoring my second church in Belvedere in southeast London, just next to the River Thames. I had no ill health to speak of other than your cold bit of age-related sciatica, nothing tremendous. And in one 12-hour period, on the 2nd of November 2019, I had 4 simultaneous strokes. One that affected my eyes, I can see just differently. One affected my ears. One affected my balance, that's why I'm holding on for dear life. And one which was a devastating categorized stroke by the medical profession in the brainstem. And the brainstem controls everything: your breathing, your head movements, your limbs, your gut, everything except vital organs. And this is a picture of me being locked in. I don't remember this photograph being taken because of sedation, but for anyone who doesn't know what locked-in syndrome is, it's where you're completely compos mentis, totally aware of your surroundings, memory, emotions. Everything is all there, as I used to put it, but you're 100% paralyzed in all your limbs and inside. As you can imagine, this is really quite devastating. We got to the point in that first week where the doctor said to Sam that I had 10 to 20% chance of survival. And that survival was not me standing here talking to you. That survival was 24-hour care, 7 days a week, in an institution. And so Sam had the terrible situation where she had to bring my 2 children in to see me in this state, thinking, is this going to be the last time we're going to see him alive? And the quandary Sam had was, do I want that memory to be with loads of pipes in his body? You can't, even at this point, this photograph was taken a day too early because I had a tracheostomy put in. That's why I have this mark on my throat, because my diaphragm was paralyzed. So I couldn't breathe. So I needed life support to help me breathe. So everything you can possibly imagine was wrong. If I can just show you very briefly these, actually I'll go back to the last one. Me and Sam spent 3 months, speaking through an alphabet board, not with my lips, because my lips didn't work. And the tracheotomy was, as I say, helping me to not, if I can put it in gentle terms, not drown it in my spit. They had to suck out my, they call them secretions, about 12, 13 times a day. And so I had to learn how to say yes and no, 1 blink for yes, 2 blinks for no. And then Sam and I would have this conversation that would last throughout the whole day, but it was laborious. You can laugh. It took jolly ages to say one word. And I had to ask Sam to forgive me for being so black and white. I even started using text language, which is terrible, really poor grammar. But you'll forgive me. It was just so much to the point. So you can see the contrast there from then till now. And this is some of the things I had to go through. Obviously, I had to learn to stand, learn to walk. Every finger, every fibre, every tendon in my body had to be re-strengthened. And you can see the left side is taking longer than the right. I didn't have a stroke that affected my left side. I had a stroke that devastated my entire body. The left side just worse than the others. So you had to press this putty for 6 months, gradually grading in strength. And there you can see, under the heading Draper's Ward, the right photograph, me walking out of hospital. After 10 months, because I was wheeled in there, locked in. And like this man in the story had an incredible transformation, and you've seen the transformation amongst you. It's still happening. And this was the scenario we're actually reading about. This man was totally devastated, totally out of control. They tried to give me a bit of dignity in hospital. I had my nappy for 10 months, changed by ladies every day. That's dehumanizing, but it was part of the job. I got used to it, I accepted it. This man, he just walked around aimlessly naked, not even caring about bodily functions. He just was not in his right mind, being so possessed. And so, the second thing Jesus said was, go and tell people how God has had mercy on you. It was the mercy that Jesus wanted to single out, how much he's done, and by his mercy. He wanted this man to be his emissary, to go and tell other people about this mercy. What happened for me, and similar to the man, is the mercy started in both of our lives by a word from Jesus. He said, go and say how God's had mercy on him. The way God had mercy on him was by a word. That word delivered him, and that word came to me in ICU in a really powerful supernatural experience, which I won't tell you about now, but you can read about it, and I'll mention that in a minute. But for me, that mercy meant my brain started to reconnect with different parts of my body. Now, that's not unheard of, don't get me wrong. Other people have strokes and their brain reconnects with their limbs. Sadly, and I saw it many, many times, they don't. And I remember looking at my hospital ward, seeing a lady who was trying to come off her tracheostomy, but her brain hadn't reconnected with her swallowing muscles, and she wasn't able to go through the process. She tried with helpers and carers and her husband to live with the tracheostomy, went for a bus ride, did a number of things that she would do in day-to-day life. She couldn't do it. She had lost her voice as well, and her and her husband were communicating through lip reading. But I remember the day when I saw her be committed to institutionalized living, thinking, that should be me. But after that reconnection happened to me, and then the hard work began of exercising, and quite a lot of my recovery has come down to that. But it's been started off by that miraculous joining together. Now, when one of the consultants came around after about 3 or 4 weeks, he said, I want to do a test on you because I was paralyzed, couldn't feel anything. When you're paralyzed, it doesn't mean that you can't do anything. It means you literally cannot feel anything. So just want you to just touch the back of your hand now. Let me see you touch the back of your hand. Imagine you can see that, but you can't feel it. So every day, Sam would come in and hold my hands, and I could see her holding my hands, but I couldn't feel it. I couldn't feel the bed I was lying on. I couldn't feel the sheets I was lying on. I was lying under. But this man came round and said, I'm going to do a touch test on you now. And I'm going to touch parts of your limb, and you tell me if you can feel it. Through the alphabet ball this was, so I blink yes or double blink no. So he touched me in 3 places, and I thought, oh, I can feel that, so it's a quick blink for yes. And then he said, now, can you feel this one? And I couldn't feel it. So I just double blinked, no. And he said, well, that's good because I didn't touch you. And then he said, can you feel this? And I said, yes. I communicated yes. And he said, that is a very good sign of recovery. Because if you've got a sensation, that basically means things have a very good chance of coming back. And this was only 4 weeks after Sam had been told that I was going to be institutionalized for life. By that time, we'd already come off life support. Now, there's too much to tell you now, and I can't explain to you now. And I just want to show this. I think, Martin, they've gone dead. You'll have to activate the slides. That's right. I've written this book, and it's with the publishers now. It will come out in a few weeks. We'll tell you about it when it comes out. But it tells a story of the supernatural encounter with Jesus in ICU. It tells about the tragedy that befell us and how we came through it. It tells about the levels of devastation we experienced, similar to the man in this story, and you may too have experienced terrible things, such that you're so encapsulated by the pain and the suffering, you don't know which way to turn. Just like this man, you may not be possessed, you may not have locked-in syndrome and be paralyzed with tracheotomy, but you are equally bound up with what's happening. People can have that even online if you're listening. Your life can be so controlled and overtaken by the level of suffering. And the Lord has shown in this story and through my life that when he speaks the word of mercy, wonderful things can happen. Now, there's quite a few videos of my recovery and photographs, and you can see the various social media outlets that I have if you want to look at a blog or YouTube, or you want to... Who's on TikTok? Oh, that bombed, didn't it? Did my first TikTok video yesterday, and there's plenty of others on YouTube and things like that, and Facebook. You can have a look at those just to encourage you. The book is called Don't Get Excited But for a Reason. You can read about why it's fairly significant to do with my speech. And it tells also about how we as a family have dealt with coming back to normal, as it were, living life again. I think about this man in the story. He didn't just go back all hunky-dory, it's fine. He had relationships to repair. He had to go and integrate back into a family. We don't know if he had a family or not. He had to go through a lot of judgment and questioning and doubting as to his recovery. Was he the real person? Was he still okay? So this story for this man here is kind of half done. And this book really explains how we're dealing with this on a day-to-day basis. But it's written, though it's written from my perspective as a minister, it's not a Christian book. It's written as a crossing over book. So those who are spiritual, those who are thinking about faith, who did have faith, those who have been de-churched in any kind of way. So if you have a neighbour or someone you know who's in that situation, or you think that person might want to come to an Alpha course, this is the kind of book to help warm them up and see what God can do for them. Now, before the strokes happened, I wrote another book. I think some of you have read it, but the irony of this is I wrote it about mercy and edited it and finalised it just literally about 2 weeks before the strokes hit. I didn't get to publish this until I came out of hospital. And it was part of my supernatural experience that I realised that's why God had me write the book. So I could experience this and then write about it. Now, obviously, it doesn't mention the strokes in there, apart from at the very end. I make a very little addendum to it. But it explains in this book about God's mercy. It shows us as Christians how we've received the mercy. It shows how we're receiving it daily, how we receive it eternally, how it follows us every day, and how it's so life-transforming. It needs to re-energize and correct the way we see the entire universe, our whole existence, the whole reason for everything. It explains suffering and the motive for it and the reason for it and why it happens and how we deal with it. It's that transforming. We have all received mercy when we were non-Christians, and every non-Christian needs to receive that mercy to avoid the coming wrath. And at the end of the book, I came up with this kind of definition of the word. This has got some serious, we're international, you've got some serious time lag on these things here. A just God, this is a definition of mercy from some of the passages that I use in the book. A just God meeting an offender's need. Let me just read that again. You take it in. A just God meeting an offender's need. Now, this man was actually an offender. He was living in Isaiah's dark land. You hear that prophecy around Christmas time, a light is shining in darkness. Well, that darkness in Isaiah's mind was the area around the Jordan, in the modern-day Syria. And this is where that man was from. He had no covenant with God. He was not a Jew. He was a Gentile. He was outside of the favour of God. And what this means, this shows us something else wonderful about God. It shows us that he has a disposition for mercy before we even cry out for it. If you do a study through Scripture, you'll see that mercy comes to those who cry out to God and those who turn to God. Not those lives are sorted out and are perfect, those who are in a terrible mess, but who turn to God as their last, only and most desperate hope. But in this situation, and in my story, we were beyond that. And we relied on the disposition of God. That's why James says mercy triumphs over judgment, because he has a predisposition to show mercy. And that's what he wanted to go and get this man to tell the 10 towns, tell the area on the other side of Jordan. And so we see this very clear message that's coming to us. Jesus the man is marked by much mercy. That's what marks him out. And 3 chapters on, in chapter 8 of Mark, Peter's put all these things together and he's realised, I can mark out this man through much mercy. And he actually said, when Jesus asked him, who do you say I am? He says, you're the Christ, the Son of the living God. It had taken Peter 8 chapters to work it out. But this miracle and the way it was done and what he saw played a role in his understanding that no man has this level of mercy. No man has that level of mercy. Only God. So he was able to answer that big question that they had at the time, that Jesus was the Son of God. Now, there's something quite interesting in this passage that if you don't pay attention to detail, you won't see it. And I want to just open it up to you and explain the reason why Jesus wanted to be marked out this way. If you look down to Mark chapter 5, verse 19 and 20, if you're at a phone, just flick down to it or just turn one page over to the right. Mark chapter 5, 19 and 20. Jesus did not let him, but said, go home to your family and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how much he has had mercy on you. So the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis. Let's say it together. Decapolis. How much Jesus had done for him, and all the people were amazed, meaning all the people in Decapolis were amazed. He'd been out of their society for a long time, and he was integrated back in society, and they were amazed by this. Now, just turn over 2 pages of what it is in my Bible. Flick down a bit to Mark chapter 7, verse 31, and you'll understand how mercy works and how our lives and mindsets have been transformed by it. Chapter 7, verse 31. Then Jesus left the vicinity of Tyre and went through Sidon, down to the Sea of Galilee, and into the region of the Decapolis. What had Jesus done? He set up the Decapolis for revival. This man was spreading the message of mercy. And that's why Jesus was able to heal this deaf and mute man, because they were ready. Oh, it's you. You're the one. You're the man who did this amazing thing. You must be more than man. You've been marked out in our minds by how much mercy you've shown this guy. And they were open. And, today I just want to encourage you, your testimony, your story about how God has transformed your life from before you were a Christian to now. Even like me, if you've grown up in a Christian home and can't remember the time when you were transformed, you've been transformed and had significant encounters during your Christian walk, and you've seen God's mercy on you, and you've been one way before and transformed and afterwards. But as we can see now in our minds, this is how God works. He does things primarily in the universe to prepare people for the revelation of Jesus Christ. If you are ever wondering why there is suffering in your life, it is so that when you tell people about it and how you're handling it, they can see something of God in you and the sufferer. And that is more worth than suffering or gold. That is a higher reason and a higher motive than any suffering we can expect to receive or do receive or have received in this life. Is passing, is momentary, as the Bible tells us, but it's worth it. The privilege. It's amazing. I don't want to cry this much, but I do want to cry just a little. And that's what God is going to do amongst us today. I believe God is here. I'm just going to ask the worship team if they'll come up.